Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I am so glad you're here. As always, an incredible guest coming up for you today. We want to make sure that we are giving you the most usable information in a world of easy information that sometimes may not be actually true. So we want to make sure that even though the internet has been a double-edged sword and it's been wonderful for easy to find information, a lot of times we end up researching the research. So we need to make sure that we're getting good information, and that's the platform here on the Honest Health Podcast. I think you're going to be real pleased with the guest today. Dr. Mark Stengler is with us today. Hey, Dr. Stengler.
Hey, great to be with you.
I'm so glad you're here today. And we are going to be talking about a topic that affects many of us, digestion. And I think you're going to love this. I do have to give you his incredible background, so let me give you that right now. As a naturopathic medical doctor, Dr. Stengler received training in both conventional medicine and natural alternatives. He has been in the private practice for more than 27 years and has helped tens of thousands with integrative medicine. He was voted 2021 Doctor of the Decade by the International Association of Top Professionals. Dr. Stengler serves on the Medical Advisory Committee for the Yale University Complementary Medicine Outcomes Research Project. Dr. Stengler is an author and co-author of more than 20 books, including his best-selling Prescription for Natural Cures, Outside the Box Cancer Therapies, and Healing the Prostate. His most recent book, The Holistic Guide to Gut Health, Discovering the Truth About Leaky Gut, Balancing Your Microbiome, and Restoring Whole Body Health. It's amazing. I've read it a couple times. We'll talk a lot about that today as well. He has been published in several peer-reviewed medical journals, including the International Journal of Family and Community Medicine, Endocrinology and Metabolism International Journal, the Journal of Nutritional Health and Food Engineering, and Alternative Therapies in Health and Medicine. Dr. Stengler received his Doctorate of Naturopathic Medicine at the National University of Natural Medicine. He also has a Master of Science in Human Biology from Liberty University. Additional degrees include a Master of Religious Studies and a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Arts. In addition, Dr. Stengler has a certificate in Advanced Metabolic Endocrinology from the Metabolic Medical Institute. He has completed coursework in logic and reasoning from Oxford University. He is currently completing a PhD in health studies. He is the medical director for Emerald Labs, and Dr. Stengler enjoys working with his wife, Dr. Angela Stengler, at the Stengler Center for Integrative Medicine in Encinitas, California. Oh my goodness, I'm exhausted. So that's fantastic. Thank you for being here today.
Oh yeah, I was looking forward to being on with you.
You know, I think it's going to be fun to talk about something that isn't very fun for a lot of people because many people don't feel like they have alternatives available. A lot of people think they only have over-the-counter products that they can use from the drugstore or medicines, but they don't really realize that we do have the power in our own hand to have a better and healthier digestion and a better digestive system and get the benefits of all the things that we are consuming, including our supplements.
Oh, absolutely. Well, as you know, digestion is so fundamental to health. And like you said, when you look at the statistics, just the plain statistics on the amount of Americans who have digestive problems, I mean, it's astronomical. I mean, just irritable bowel syndrome alone, depending which study you look at, 25% of the population have irritable bowel syndrome. One of the most common reasons people go to the doctor. And then you take all the other health conditions, acid reflux, inflammatory bowel disease, gallbladder problems, it just goes on. And then we have a large segment, I think, of the American population who maybe don't have digestive disease, but they certainly have digestive problems, an unhealthy digestive system, which then, unbeknownst to them, probably a lot of their doctors, it's affecting their whole body health.
You know, the interesting thing that I think a lot of us are kind of aware of now is as I was coming up, through the ranks. It seemed like at the very beginning, no one but older people had digestive situations that were a problem for them every single day. You never really heard of
Mhm.
younger people and even some of the middle-aged folks out there having problems with their gut. And today, it's like the Great Wall of digestion has come down, and we're seeing it across all age levels, all demographics, all races, all everything. People that are now having trouble. I was talking to someone yesterday. He's 19 years old and he can barely even keep food down, and he's having a terrible time. They say it's linked to his stress. It could be. But when we looked at his diet, we got a really good look on why the problem is there, or at least a main reason.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. As you were saying that, I was thinking back to when I was in school, going through all the grades, and I never knew any of my classes and friends with digestive problems. So that's a very good point. And now, like you said, I just saw a patient the other day who's like 14 years old with, severe ulcerative colitis. We never
Yeah.
had those things 25, 30 years ago.
Mm-mm.
So I'm on the same wavelength as you. Primary, it's diet, but yes, there's other factors like environmental toxins and stress and things like that. But definitely, diet is the most fundamental reason why people, at least young people, have digestive problems. I think as we get into the older population, pharmaceutical medications and other things start to take their effect too.
Why did you decide to write a book on digestion?
Well, really, there was two reasons. Number one, as you know, in holistic medicine, just digestion is so fundamental. If you look at any of the great healing traditions, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, European, whatever it is, everyone throughout, as long as it's been recorded, emphasized the importance of digestion. I mean, when I was in school, we're basically told if you can't figure out what's causing the problem, just treat the digestion, you got a decent chance the person will get better.
Good
And then
point.
as time went on, more and more research came out really demonstrating this is true. But then what I saw in recent years was in the medical community, they're still really were poo-pooing this idea of like leaky gut syndrome and how digestion affects the body systemically. So what I did is I wanted to put it to the test myself in terms of just the literature. I mean, I saw it with patients like you have, for many decades. It is true. But I went through the primary research, all mainstream medical journals, and lo and behold, I found hundreds and hundreds of published articles talking about the reality of how leaky gut syndrome is occurring, how the microbiome affects not just digestive health, but whole body health. And here it is in mainstream medical literature, and your average doctor has no idea about it, or they just say, oh, well, that leaky gut stuff, that's just for people with severe illness and it doesn't apply to the general population. So it just wasn't true from that. So I was kind of almost making a spoof, if you will, of the mainstream medicine in terms of what they're saying, but what their literature is saying.
Exactly. And I thank you for it. I do love the book. I think it's wonderful. It's called The Holistic Guide to Gut Health, of course, by Dr. Mark Stengler. I have read it probably 2.5 times now, and I tried to get it to 3 times, but I fell asleep the last time. It was too late at night, and I was trying to finish it. So, but I have got a lot out of it. And the interesting thing, even though we've been in this field for a long time, there's always more to learn. And we're continually learning. We have to stop buying into the physician pharmaceutical commercials. It's funny. I think I remember the first pharmaceutical commercial I ever saw was a commercial for Prilosec.
Mm.
And it was a long time ago, and people were just taken back that they would advertise a drug. But they had this person running through a field of flowers, picking up flowers, saying, no more gas, no more heartburn. And the next day, half the country called their doctor because they wanted Prilosec. We
Hmm.
have to remember, I tell people all the time, when you see a pharmaceutical commercial on TV, don't watch it because they're playing to your audio visual. What you need to do is only go to the audio and get rid of the visual. And when you listen to what they're really saying, they're saying all the things that are true, even all the side effects, but we don't hear those because we want to run through that field of flowers without gas and bloating. And it's the same thing for all medications. So if you see a pharmaceutical commercial, close your eyes and listen to it and then decide whether it's something you even want to ask about. But that, I think, was the beginning of
Hmm.
where people started using things like acid proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole and things like that. And it's so funny. It says right on the label, use for 14 days. I know people that have been on it for years and
Oh, yeah.
years and years. And a really good friend, and I'd love for you to address this. She had terrible digestion about 8 or 9 years ago. We talked about enzymes. We talked about greens. We talked about probiotics. We talked about bitters. We talked about a Mediterranean diet, none of which did she want to do. So she went to the doctor. He gave her a Prilosec or one of those in that family. And within a couple days, all of her symptoms were gone. And in her mind, she fixed the problem. So here we are 8 or 9 years later. And her new doctor says, you can't stay on this. You have got to get off of this. Your liver enzymes are high. There's a lot of issues. And it was the only medication she was taking, even though she was now getting it over the counter off the shelf at her grocery store. So he took her off of it. Within 5 days, she was exactly back where she was 8 or 9 years ago. But he also measured and said that her bone density was that of an 80-year-old person because over these years, it had been shutting down the acid pump. So I would love to address this because it's a huge issue. And I think people need to understand it, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the most prescribed drugs in America and around the world, like you said, are the acid blockers. The biggest category, the proton pump inhibitors or PPIs, like you said, and you can get them without a prescription. You've been able to for many years. And so here's, I think, what happens with this. When you really look at medicine, American medicine is good for emergencies. But what's happened in general practice and in the practice by most doctors is they use emergency medicine and then they apply it to chronic health problems. When the chronic health problems really are mainly a function of diet, lifestyle, toxin exposure, sleep, all the things we have control of for the most part, a lot of them. And so they use emergency medicine for chronic health problems, and then they're given medications, chronically, and it leads to a breakdown in health. Just like you said, it's been very well researched that people who are on the PPI medications long term end up with osteoporosis, amongst other problems. They have higher risk of SIBO, higher risks of pneumonia. They can have memory problems. Why? Because the body's designed so that you need stomach acid, obviously, first to liquefy and break down food of any kind. Then, of course, to especially break down, the proteins into the amino acids. But then you need it, the acidic nature of it, to absorb many different nutrients, such as, lo and behold, calcium, lo and behold, magnesium, lo and behold, vitamin D. When we're talking about bone, vitamin C is bone too. And then for memory and things like that, you end up with B12 deficiency. Well, the average American senior has B12 deficiency, at least 1 out of 4 do, and then you take a PPI on top of that, that rate's going to go up much higher, and then you start getting memory problems and fatigue problems. So yes, when you start using these things long term, you run into other health problems down the road, which is why I don't have a problem if someone has a major flare-up and an ulcer or whatever and use a medication for a week or two. But when there's no plan to treat the underlying root issues and you're just on it indefinitely, you're going to create disease. Now, I always tell some people I know, they're usually not patients. I said, if you're the kind of person who does not want to change your diet, does not want to change your lifestyle, then yes, you go ahead and use the medications if you want at your own risk. But for the thinking people, you got to think way beyond that.
Absolutely. And you really have to think to yourself, we can't go for the quick fix. We're so motivated today to get instantaneous magic wand fixes. And we get frustrated when someone tells us that it's going to take a while, even though we did not get in these health predicaments overnight. It's been a progressive process. And the problem is, we have to slow down and take a look at the big picture and realize that many times these health problems have happened because of things we've done, life choices that we've made, diet choices that we've made. We don't know how to decompress. We don't know how to sleep correctly. We don't know how to balance out our mental health. We're more negative than positive. This stuff all adds up to gut and health issues. And, this friend of mine, she's just reached out to me and she's like, so what do I do? He told me I can't take this anymore. And I said, stop, rewind 8-9 years ago to the same conversation we had then. You need to support your gut with a great probiotic. You need to make sure you've got digestive enzymes. We need to switch over to a Mediterranean diet. You need greens in your diet, probably some bitters. I said, we need to make sure you've got an adequate amount of fiber. I said, we've got to go back to where we should have gone in the first place. Let's stop putting a blanket over the fire. Let's just put it out. And let's just start rebuilding. And I think she's on board now because I think now there's fear.
Yeah. Well, let's just think about, because like you said, it's amazing how many people come in the office. And we know it's statistically true how many people have GERD or acid reflux. And so, you block the stomach acid, which, like you said, gives temporary relief. But let's look at it at a deeper level. Why do people get relief from it? Well, they get relief because the natural mucin, or we can use the word mucus layer of the stomach, has been eroded. Why has it been eroded? It's been eroded from poor diet. It's been eroded from the effects of stress, medications and things like that. So you take the medication, like, wow, this medication really solved the problem. Well, no, it's suppressing the stomach acid, which, as we talked about, you need to digest your food, absorb your nutrients. It's not addressing that underlying mucus layer which has been eroded, number one. And then number two, there's a valve called the lower esophageal sphincter valve between the esophagus and stomach, and it's not closing properly. Now, why isn't it closing properly? Well, we know in large part why. A lot of it is diet, the bad fats in the diet. Some people, it's just they're sensitive to caffeine and some of the acidic foods. Weight, being overweight in the abdomen puts pressure on that valve. Maybe you got structural problems, maybe you got like chiropractic problems or things like that, which could be addressed, which could help. So it's not doing anything to address why that valve's not closing properly, and you're getting a backwash of the stomach acid. So we got to think deeper. We know these things. People know this in medicine, but here's the problem. This friend of yours, she goes to her doctor and says, yeah, this is, your bones are breaking down. You've got nutrient deficiencies from these medications. It's been well studied. You can get off it. But how much, if any, did the doctor go into, okay, this is what the studies show, this kind of diet can help. Here's how you can get that valve to close properly. Here's what you can do to get that natural mucus layer built back up so you're not getting irritated so easily. So as we know, it's highly unlikely that's going to happen in a regular office. And then these poor people, they're stranded on their own because also we know the studies show that when people just abruptly stop PPIs, they get a rebound effect. Yep. They don't have that natural mucus layer. Stomach acid is being secreted out. The tissue's getting irritated and like, forget this. I'm going back on the medication. I can't be fixed, is what they're thinking.
Well, it's funny because I got a text from her yesterday afternoon and she said, I'm at the store right now, and she's taking pictures, thank God for picture phones. She's like, I picked all these up. And I said, great. And I said, where are you going shopping for food? And she said, she told me where she was going, and it's a wonderful market. It's all great quality food. And I said, so we're doing this? And she goes, yeah, I don't have a choice. And I thought to myself, it had to get to a desperation for some of us to make it. And, we're all a little guilty. We all want a quick fix. We'd love that. But, in her case, I think he scared her a little bit because now, she's even afraid if she falls down, she's going to break something, so she needs to really start rebuilding. I said, and it's not just about taking supplements. And this is a key as well. Supplements are fantastic, but you have to be able to digest them. So, some people are going through the motions, but they're not addressing the gut, and they're wasting that whole step because they've got really rich stool and rich urine and nothing is changing because they haven't been able to break it down.
Well, that's a very good point. I've done many tests on patients over the years and stool tests and things, and it's amazing how often you see, the enzyme production output is low, the bile production output is low. There's other fancier tests you can do for stomach acid. So yeah, the average person in America, it goes beyond a diet part, like you said. Some people do change their diet very well, and that's good, and that's helpful. But because their digestive function isn't where it should be, they don't get the full benefits. Their digestive symptoms don't come back to where they were. Because as I explained to people, sometimes people had, some stresses that occurred in life, maybe the work, maybe, a family issue, a financial, and you've been under stress. And so the body's kind of like in emergency mode. It's going to keep the muscles and the brain and the heart and the vital organs working good. The blood flow's going to your muscles and your brain as it should. Less blood flow to your digestive system, which at any given time should have about 40% of blood flow. So you're under stress and stuff. So then what happens, maybe hopefully that stress is gone or you're dealing with it better. But things don't always come back online. You've got to do things to get those digestive organs kind of retrained in a way, if you will. And that's where the things you do with people, and I do, we help them to get their own digestive function back to normal. So it often goes back to more than just changing the diet, which you have to do, but you can do a lot more than that, like you said.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is this idea of poor digestion and unhealthy gut situations, is it an American thing, or are we seeing it more around the world in other places? We know a lot of countries have adopted our terrible eating habits, so I think they're seeing some changes. But is it as bad in other parts of the world, or are we leading the pack in unhealthy guts?
Well, statistically, we're definitely leading. We're definitely leading the pack. But like you said, with the way the American diet's been exported, if you start tracking, which I've done in some of my master's work, you start looking at other countries who got excited about and adopted in the American fast food restaurants.
Yeah.
I mean, you see everything decline. The digestive function, goes up in terms of problems. The chronic disease goes up. I mean, people always hear words like, Okinawa and, China and places like that. But these studies are getting to be 20 years old. I mean, because now we know, like in Okinawa, people used to live the longest and had the lowest heart disease and cancer. It just isn't like it used to be. Their rates are much worse because they've gotten, kind of sucked into the American fast foods being cool and fun and, delicious and all that. And so everything, unfortunately, has changed because of that
Isn't it
around the world.
isn't
Yeah.
it amazing how the food people today, they understand that we lead with our palate and we lead
Mm.
with our tongue, and they know. I know they have these board meetings and they're like, just do it. They're going to love it. They're going to eat it. They don't care that it's unhealthy. They love it. They're going to crave it. And that's exactly what happens. And we center every part of our world around food.
Well, I was talking to a friend. I was kind of half joking, but I'm like, you wonder if there's like people in the American military, right? And then you got these countries which maybe are, semi threats or enemies in a way. I mean, what's kind of what's one of the easiest way to take them down? Well, you get a country with, hundreds, millions, billions of people, and you get our fast food restaurants in there. You know what I mean? And that's one way you kind of take them down because their healthcare system, when you got that many people, you can't really deal with it. Anyways, yeah.
No, it's a good point. And I have some friends of mine, and they lived in Japan. Their families have been there a long time, and they're healthy. Their kids were young teenagers, really healthy, great skin, and they relocated to Los Angeles about 3 years ago. He has heart disease now. His wife is a diabetic. She's 50 pounds overweight. The kids have acne and terrible digestion because they 100% adopted the American lifestyle. And we were just talking, and I'm like, really? I said, you guys were the healthiest people. You were my ideal specimens of great health. And he says, yeah, well, we moved here and we moved into a new house and we moved into a new way of living. And they're sorry. They're trying to clean it up now, but they agree. They just bought right into it.
Oh, 100%. I've written a bit about on how Japanese women move over to America. American women on average, about 90, 85, 90% of women have hot flashes. I mean, not where they want some relief from it. In Japan, it's about 10% of women have issues with hot flashes. But like you said, in the studies, when they're here for 5 years or longer, again, presuming they moved here before their menopausal age, when they've been here 5 years or longer, their hot flash problems are up to 90%, just like Americans. So it's not a genetic thing. It's it's the foods and the stress and probably toxins too.
Environmental
Hmm.
and choice,
Right.
so it's So so let me ask you a question. As you see people coming into you and you're able to get them to adopt a healthier diet, something like a Mediterranean or some kind of a good quality, well balanced diet, where do you start with them? I mean, do you address the enzymatic action? Do you address the probiotic action? Do we have to teach them how to slow down and eat their food and not overdrink their liquids at their meals? And how do you address it?
Well, because not only in America, but in California, which means you're expected to get even faster results. People are even more impatient. I,
True,
I,
true.
I honestly do, I honestly do both at the same time. I'll get them to do some diet changes, probably give them some digestive support from the get-go. Depends what's going on. Obviously, if they got things like acid reflux or GERD, I'll give them things which are soothing, healing for that. If they got more problems like gas and bloating, then, the enzymes and the probiotics and things, see how their bowels are moving. So honestly, my patients, just because of the culture, man, you got to do both. I mean, it seems like in America, if you don't get someone better within 2 weeks, they just, are too patient. So
True.
natural medicine is so powerful, so effective that when you do it right, the vast majority of people, if you talk to them in 2 weeks, they are doing a lot better. They make just some simple diet changes. I do use the Mediterranean diet a lot. I do a modified one, like I talk about in the book, with reduced or restricted gluten, dairy products. And there's other diets we use too. I always ask patients, look, realistically, what kind of foods are you willing to eat and which ones are you just definitely not have any interest in? Because you have some patients who are just like, I'm not eating fish, I just despise it. So, Mediterranean may not be the best kind of diet for them. So
Yep.
I always ask them up front. And we have several different diets we can use. But yes, I try and make some key diet changes first. We give them meal planning too, um, knowing that people aren't going to be perfect on it, but at least moving in the right direction. And then, yeah, give them some digestive support, just depending what's going on. The younger the person is, the more I'm trying to get their own organs working better. You had mentioned earlier about bitter herbs. Bitter herbs are very unique because they've been around for a long time in herbal medicine. And as I talk about some of the studies in the book, they're very unique because bitter herbs, when you taste them, or even if you don't taste them, you hit the bitter receptors in your stomach, they do stimulate like your digestive, like your saliva production, your stomach acid production. It stimulates the pancreas to produce and release enzymes, and definitely the liver and gallbladder for bile. So you're hitting all the major digestive organs, and that's kind of like I use the word retraining. You start having patients take those before meals, not just for a few days, but week after week, and you get those digestive organs working better on their own, which is really what we want. And so the younger the person is, now, if someone's 75 or 80, then, you could do that, but it may not be sufficient. And then even more so to use enzymes and maybe betaine hydrochloride with pepsin. But again, I also kind of go with the patients. I mean, there's some patients, they just aren't going to do it regularly for a period of time. Then I'll say, hey, you know what? You eat out a lot, you travel a lot, you eat a lot of work, you need to take digestive enzymes with your meals. So at least, even if you're not eating healthy, or if you are eating healthy, you're going to break your food down, absorb some nutrients from it.
No, it's very true. And there is a lot of individuality that goes in,
Mm.
and not everybody fits in the same box. Not
Mhm.
everybody follows the same protocol. Not everybody is willing to give things up. I mean, I have a friend of mine many years ago, and it's hysterical, but he would do his perfect way of eating enzymes, everything 6 days a week. And I live out here in Las Vegas, and he had worked downtown in the older area. And on Fridays, he would have a smoothie for breakfast. Back then, they called them protein shake. And for lunch, he would have 3 Castle burgers every Friday
Mm.
for lunch. And then he would eat a salad for dinner. Because I let him do that, he was amazing the rest of the week, every other meal. And he dropped about 160 pounds that
Wow.
way. But he needed that Friday afternoon
Yep.
palate treat. And I said, look, I would rather have you do that, 5% of the time, and then 95% you're doing all the good stuff. So he stayed on that program for about 2 years, and he did everything perfect. And I ran into him, goodness, probably about maybe 6 months ago. It's been forever since I've seen him. He kept all the weight off. He is still doing exactly the same thing. And this is probably 15 years later. And he's still doing it. He's healthy. He's not on any meds. He got all that weight off. He did his first 10K. And,
Wow.
but I mean, that's not normal. Most people, either they start out with gangbusters and they slow down, or they start out real slow at the beginning and then they get slower. And, a few people from a handful will stick with it long enough to see a benefit or a change.
Well, yeah, and I always tell, patients and people interning with me and stuff, look, the more serious of a condition or disease you have, the less luxury you have for taking time off. So, like you said, like your friend, I mean, yes, he's overweight and all that, but he didn't have, cancer, he didn't have,
Mm-mm.
colitis or something like that. So people have those more serious diseases. You don't have a lot of leeway. You don't have really luxury to do that. But like you said, the average person, if you don't give them a little bit of leeway, they often will burn out and they just say, forget it. So even if my patients are doing 90% initially, they do very well. And to be honest, if people doing it 75%, they do well. Even people do 50% are going to see obvious improvement, but the more work you put into it, the more disciplined you are, the better the results you'll get. And the first 2 weeks, first 2 to 6 weeks are really the critical time period, right? Because your taste buds and your mood and your energy and your patterns that you're used to, you've got to change and adapt to and be very disciplined. So those first 2 weeks are just so very critical.
Do me a favor, and I thank you for that, and I agree with that 100%. I'm going to segue a little bit over. I want you to talk a little bit about Emerald Labs. I see your products all over the country. I know a lot of people that use them. What's the philosophy behind that line? Because I mean, the products are really nice. I know people that use them; they really enjoy them. You've got a versatility of products that are very, very good. When you think Emerald Labs, what do you think about the line?
Well, in my mind, it would be purity and potency. When I met the owner many years ago, he was interested, we were interested in working together. We got along real well. And I just, they had products out at that time. And what was unique about the products that they had were they were one of the few at the time who were making capsules, without flow agents, additives, fillers, binders, coloring agents, preservatives, and all that. They're one of the very few. It is more common now, but they were, one of the leaders in it, and they continue to do that. I said, look, this is great because you're doing what a lot of the doctors' lines aren't doing. This is like 15, 20 years ago. A lot of the doctors' lines still have a bunch of the junk in their products. I'm like, what's up with that? And then I said, but here's the issue. I go, if I'm going to be involved in your products, they have to be products like I would use with patients. In other words, let's say you have a formula for digestive issues, or you have a formula for joint health or memory or whatever it is. We have to have things in there that are therapeutic amounts that match what the studies used, at least the key ingredients. Okay, because I can't give people deceptive formulas. As you know, like let's say a formula uses 500 milligrams of X ingredient at this concentration, and then you see a formula has 15 things in it, and then it has like 1/10 the amount the studies used, and they say, oh, this was used in a study. I mean, it's deceptive. I mean, I can't do that. So the owner, Rick Simpson, was very much in agreement, and that's what we do with the formula. At least the lead ingredients will be duplications, if not the exact ingredients used in the studies.
That's the way it should be. And the thing about it is that this is when people get results.
Right.
One of the problems I have in this industry, and because I've been in it for 45 years, I can voice my opinion. The thing that I have found is that there's some absolutely incredible companies that are out there, but there's also something that goes on out there called piggybacking the science. And what happens is someone spends a lot of money and they do a study. They have a certain group of people. They do it for a certain period of time. They'll have a placebo. They'll use a certain clinical dosage. They'll use a high quality product. They measure it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and they get these amazing results, and then they publish it. And then Bob's company will come out of nowhere and they'll have one of the ingredients and they'll say, did you see this study? And everybody's like, yeah, we saw that study. It looks fantastic. He goes, well, we have this. And
Right.
I'll sometimes say, did you use the same potency? Did you have the same age groups in the study that you did? Did you do it for the same period of time? Is it the same group of people? Are you mirroring the actual, are you copying and actually following the same protocol? And they'll say, well, no, we didn't do studies. We're following them. And I said, but you're not. And what ends up happening is the consumer, who is finally ready to make a difference, finally ready to make a change, and they come over and they get Bob's product, let's say. And Bob's product doesn't have enough in it because it's a proprietary with vitamin dust in there. And I'm sorry to say that happens, but it does.
Yeah. Oh,
and then they take it for about a month and they see nothing. So rather than going back to the store and saying, this one didn't work, do you have something that's more suited to me, that's more potent? They just say none of it works, and then we never see them again. And that's disheartening to me as a practitioner, but also as someone in the industry where we don't want to lose people. We want people to come in and get results and stay with this protocol. So that's what I see.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, a classic example I've seen a lot in the last couple of years, ashwagandha has been a huge thing, right, in the industry, and people never heard it before and couldn't even pronounce it. Now it's, just very, very common. And so you get all these patients coming in and they got, they're anxious and stressed and insomnia and fatigue and things. And you start talking to them, and then what have you tried? And then they say, oh, I tried this ashwagandha, my friends recommended it or whoever. And they say, well, how long did you take it for? Oh, I took it for like 3 months and I didn't notice anything. And then, well, what did you take? And you look it up, they show you the bottle. Well, I go, don't consider the ashwagandha doesn't work. I mean, look at this product here. I mean, it's got like 0.5% what they call withanolides in the studies that lower cortisol and help energy and stress. I mean, they're 8%. So you're using a product that's 8 times weaker than what the studies used. So no, let's not give up on it. Let's give you one actually, it's therapeutic. Anyways, it's the same thing what you're saying. So it is frustrating.
Exactly.
It's not illegal for people to do that. It's just not good integrity.
I agree. And I want people to make a difference. When I had my stores, oh my God, so many years ago, my favorite part of my job was to do radio shows. I did over 20,000 shows. I was on for 42 years. And so my favorite thing would be to have people on, interview them, have people come in the stores, try something, and then come back and say, oh my goodness, I feel so much better. That was perfect for me. That was my favorite part. That's the stuff that's kept me in this industry for so long, is that wonderful feedback.
Well, how could you be a natural health care practitioner if we didn't get good results? I mean, think about it. The system's kind of rigged against us. We don't have all the ads on TV, right? In general, insurance doesn't work well. People are paying out of pocket, right? Which means they want to see results even faster, right? Because they're paying out of pocket. And we still get exceptional results. Why? Because when you use things properly, right, the right training and the right quality products, you do get very consistent, excellent results. So it's really a testimony that this field of medicine is very, very effective, assuming you're using the right things with quality products. And treating underlying problems simultaneously, like the diet and the stress and the environmental toxins and the sleep and all that. You start doing all that, you have phenomenal results.
That's where I was just going to jump in there. You're reading my mind 100%. And, and I think a lot of times people have felt bad for so long that they just think it's the normal way to feel anymore. And they've accepted it. And I always tell people, do not ever accept mediocrity of health. The thing is, you can make a change somewhere that can make enough of a difference so you're not feeling like that every single day. And I think they've been feeling it for so long, they don't have any hope that they can make a change.
Well, what you probably see, like I do too, there are a lot of Americans who, which is a good thing, I think, they're using supplements now instead of pharmaceuticals. So A, the safety goes up exponentially, right? B, it is working with the healing systems of the body generally, which is good. But C, they do notice, obvious good results if they're using quality products. But a lot of them aren't doing the foundational stuff, like you're talking about the diet and the stress and all that. So even though they're not doing the foundational things, they're still getting obvious benefits, but it could go beyond that.
I was talking with a friend of mine. I had waited on her family and her family's family for many, many years. And we had a talk about a month and a half ago. And she said, I changed my diet. I'm using the enzymes. I'm taking a good multi. I'm taking some women's health and probiotics and magnesium and fish oils and all that stuff. She goes, but I'm just not feeling like me. And I'm like, how much activity are you getting? And she goes, I'm behind a computer all day. And I said, I want you to go for a 45-minute walk every night. Take that overweight dog of yours that I love so much for a walk with you for 45 minutes every night. And she called me about 2 weeks later and she said, this is really different. And I said, you feeling different? She goes, it was like the piece of the puzzle that was missing was the activity. She says, but I'm now sleeping better because I'm exercising and being active. So I'm sleeping better because my body wants to go into more of a rest state. So to your point, which is a brilliant point, is you have to do the foundational stuff because otherwise you're missing a chance to be as healthy as you could be.
And notice your friend probably is walking in the evening if she lived in Las Vegas.
Yes, she is. And it's a little cold at night during the winter, but we're getting ready to go up into the 80s and 90s next week. So here we go.
Well, it is interesting. It's a very motivating factor because, here in California, a lot of people have dogs. Yep. And so, and they're not exercising. So you want them to get exercise. They're kind of like, you can see they're not excited. I go, are you walking your dog 30 minutes a day? Well, no. Well, your dog's thrilled to go out on a walk. Yeah. I mean, they're much more willing to do their daily walks if they take their dog out. So, yeah.
Yeah, my Frenchies don't want to go for a walk. The Border Collies, yes. But the Frenchies are wired for about 30 steps. And they're ready to lay down. But the Border Collies, they'll run a marathon and then they're warmed up.
Yeah. Wow.
So, well, do me a favor. The book is called The Holistic Guide to Gut Health by Dr. Mark Stengler. The line of products that you're formulating and working with are the Emerald Health products. I think they're wonderful. You can find them at high-quality health food stores all over the United States. I do recommend that people take a look at some other books. Is your book available on Amazon?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
This is one of the ones that I'm recommending. And you guys know, for me to recommend a book, it needs to be concise and honest and transparent and easy to understand for all levels of what people know and want to know, but also something that you'll probably take a highlighter and you'll make notes and go back and look at it again, because I've even done that in mine. I do that as well. So this is one of the books. It's the first book second book I've recommended on my podcast. So this is one that you want in your library, because this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I'm so happy that you did this. It's a wonderful read, and there's a lot of passion in there.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
So I loved having you today. Will you come back and see me again?
Oh, I'd love to. Absolutely.
I'd love to have you back again. I don't know if you know, but the way I end my podcast is I always ask my guest for a thought of the day.
Thought of the day is you cannot have optimal health unless your digestion is healthy.
Wow. You didn't even have to think about that. I love it. My guest today, Dr. Mark Stengler. The name of the book, don't forget it. It's called The Holistic Guide to Gut Health by Dr. Mark Stengler. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Remember to go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com. Once you're there, tap on the Honest Health logo. It'll take you to Spotify for the audio versions of the podcast. If you tap on the YouTube logo, you can actually watch us and watch the interview as well. Some people like to watch, some people like to listen, especially when they're driving. I recommend listening and not watching, which is a good idea. And come back and see us again. And Dr. Stengler, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Goodbye, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.